Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Beardlib Editor tutorial. Today we're going to be going into how elements work, how they execute each other, and some specific things relating to elements. So, to start off, I'm going to get us a nice good testing ground using the same technique we learned yesterday using the load. We're going to load this one element, very good for testing, called one plane to rule them all. We're going to again select the lowest package. There's no difference in units between the 1.16 megabyte one and the 0.05. So 0.05 is smaller, so we'll select that, load it in, and place it down just like that. Anyways, pretend I can't click at that. Oh no, but I can see it's called. If I go underneath, I can see it's called that. I can't click at it from this side. How do I get to it? Remember, there's the select function. Select. You can type in the name, select it, and delete. Just a quick overview of what we learned yesterday. And then I'm just going to move this with the arrows. Press T, rotate it, press T again, and we're good to go. So I'm going to be showing just how elements work, how they interact with each other, and how they make the game work. By doing that, we're going to go into the elements, and as you can see, like we talked about yesterday, is a whole swag and load of elements in here. I'm not going to be teaching all of them. That's what the little question mark here is for. That's there for you to teach and learn on your own. I will be showing you how they execute and work with each other though. So we're going to get this area trigger element. You can place it wherever you want. And I'm just going to ignore those because those aren't important for now. We're going to focus on this area trigger part. This area trigger part, this is unique for this element. So, I don't really use any of these specific rules here. I do know that if you want to use a shape element, you can use this shape. So we can have this one shape here. We can set up multiple area triggers to this one shape. That's the only one that I really know how to use. Other than that, I don't really use any of these. Alright, what I do use though are these, and these are very important. Alright, so this interval just detects how many times the instigator, or how many times it checks for an instigator. Alright, so we set it to 1. Every second, it'll check if there's an instigator with the amount of 1. Alright. So that's what that interval does. Trigger on. So there's a bunch of different settings here. So on enter, if a player enters the area, it'll trigger. On exit, if a player enters, nothing will happen. But if it exits, it'll trigger. Both means it'll trigger when you enter and when you exit. On empty means if there's no players in the area, it'll trigger every 0.1 second. While inside means if a player walks in, it'll trigger every 0.1 second until they leave. Alright, so I usually have it on enter, that's the default, but depending on what you need it for, that's what those settings do. We have the instigator, so this detects what's inside. By default, it is player, and for most of the time, I use player. But if you wanted to detect when a certain civilian is in a certain area, if an enemy walked into an area, this is where you want to do that. It's also very useful if you want to detect if there's loot in an area, like a bag. For now though, I'm going to keep it on player. And there's a mount. So by default it is set to 1, and that's usually what I keep it as. But you can set it to 2, 3, 4, or all. So what this can be done and used for is if one player walks in, this will execute. If I set it to 2, one player walks in, it won't execute. If another player walks in, it will, etc., etc. But what if you set it to 3 players enter, but there's only 2 players in the game. So there's 2 players and 2 bots. This will not execute, and this will never execute. But if you set it to all, this will trigger if all players enter. So if there's 3 players have to enter, and then it'll execute. If there's 2 players enter, then it'll execute, etc. and etc. For the most time, I'm going to use 1. I'm going to keep it as 1 for now. A good demonstration that I'm going to use is this element called loot bag. This loot bag element, what this does, pretty self-explanatory. It spawns a loot bag. You can see it down here. We've got a couple of settings right here. So we got this thing called push modifier. So what this is, if we use the arrow keys, we can control this little arrow, and that push modifier tells the bag that I want it to go in that direction of the arrow. And it will try to aim for where this little red square is, or circle, sorry. If we spawn an MKP wall and rotate it, just like that, we can aim for it for a specific point on this wall. It's a little finicky to control because this is up arrow and this is down arrow, but yeah, so we can control that. Push modifier tells how fast it will go in the direction of this arrow. So if you want to do and test how this push modifier works, what we can do is this quick button test right here. This will test and throw a fake bag in the direction to test how far it will go. So with push modifier at 0, we use the test. We'll see it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't have any velocity, so it's going to fall straight down from that element. We can hit stop testing though, and it'll delete the fake bag. But if we add push modifier 1, we'll see it goes for it. Push modifier 2. As you can see, it just gets faster and faster. Alright, then we're going to teach you what this carry ID means. A carry is the game's way of saying a bag. So, if we click this, we can see all the different kinds of bags that are in the game. Everything from Overkill Safe in, what's that map called? You know what I'm talking about though, with the safes. To stuff like the Lance bag for the drills, or stuff like fireworks from Golden Grin Casino. You can go through this entire list and look it up, or you can always just go click on this right here, type money, because I want money, and it will pop up right on the top. It'll show everything that has money in it. Alright, so I want a money bag, and I want to spawn it. So with test, it shows this fake one. Now that we have a carry ID, we can use the execute element. It will spawn and execute right there, but we can't delete that because that's actually in the game. Now that we know what carry ID means, we can use this manage orientation elements. What this does, we can select a couple of elements, so now this bag will spawn on these. And it seems to just randomly choose between the 2 locations. Alright, this from respawn, I'll teach you about that later. So I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to refresh and restart the game. Restarting the game will remove all these bags that I can't delete, because I don't want them in the game. Alright, so now that we restarted the game, we see all the executes are gone. I'm going to show you what this does. So, like we talked about earlier, this will trigger when one player enters. If we want to change the trigger size or shape, we can always change to a cylinder or a sphere. And with the sphere, we can always change the radius. It's kind of hard to see, but it is down there on the bottom. We can change it to a 500 or something, for example. Or with the box, we can change the width to something like 200 and 500. Self-explanatory. But we want to trigger this loot bag to spawn a money bag for us using this area trigger. So when we walk in, this executes. And we have this little list up here, manage on executed list. So what this means is when this executes, it's going to send, think of it like a pulse of electricity to another element. So we can send a little pulse of electricity from this to here to then execute this one with this little list. So we go in here, we can look up our element. For right now, there's not a lot of elements, so we can just click it. But for sake, we're going to look it up and click it like that. Now you can see there's that little line, just like a pulse of electricity going right to here. Now you might be asking, what does this 000 mean? That is how long it will take between when this is executed and when that electricity is sent. So, with this element list, we can see there's a delay right here. If we want to change it from 0 seconds to 2 seconds, we'll see that changed from 0 seconds to 2 seconds. So it will take 2 seconds from when this is executed to when this is executed. For now though, I'm going to set it to 0 for demonstration purposes. I'm now going to load into the map using the F10 button. As we can see the area trigger right there, and what will happen, we walk into it, it spawns a bag. And when we walk into it again, it doesn't trigger. Oh no, why is that? Go back into the editor stage. We go click on the element, we can see that there's something called trigger times, set to 1. This trigger time specifies how many times this element can be executed. What we can do though is change that from a 1 to a 0. Now, walk into it, and it executes every single time we walk into that square. What is this base delay? This specifies the delay in which it will do. So if I change this, it'll change that to 2 seconds. Now you might be saying, what's the difference between this way and this way? There's a very specific difference. If I copy paste this, you can select a unit and hit Alt and then drag it, and it will copy the unit or the element or unit. Now if we go in here, we can select loop bag 1, loop bag 2. So now when this is triggered, both of them are triggered. With delay, we set it to 2, both of them have a 2-second delay. But if I go to here, I set each one to have a specific delay. So I set that one to 1, so this has a base delay of 0, but this has a base delay or delay of 1. Now when I walk into it, instantly, after 1 second. Base delay just sets it so all of this will happen after the base delay. Base delay random though is ever so slightly different. You can look at it here, specifies a random amount to be added, delay plus random. So we have 2 seconds for each of them. If we use base delay of rand, we can hit 1. So now it'll say between 2 seconds and 3 seconds will this be triggered. So we look here, randomly triggers. There you go. So randomly between 2 and 3 seconds will this be executed and send it to those. I'm going to reset that to 0. So this editor name, I kind of skipped over this. This doesn't really do much, but it is used. You can see the name right here. We can hit editor name. I'm going to set it to area loot bag. Now what this is very useful for is if we look up area loot bag, we can find that right there. So that's if you want to say, if you have a bunch of these all over and they all have different bag values in it, but you don't want to spawn all of them. You want to just spawn number 5 here, which spawns diamonds. We could do that. It's just called it loot bag diamond. And when we look up loot bag, we can clearly see this one called loot bag diamond, which as we can see, there's a new connection that goes right to that. If we go into here though, there's a couple extra tools in here that I didn't mention. So we have stuff like this, which does capitalization match case. If you click this, all it does is it selects everything that's here. So if I click this, it'll select everything that was here, even if it was already there. So you see this loop bag 1 and loop bag 1. So it'll execute it multiple times now. If you click this, this will remove all of these green ones. So click that. What is useful, that plus symbol, is if you type in loot and hit I want to execute all these. It's just as simple as that. Now it executes only the loot bags, does not execute these, as you can see. So that's what that's for. Now we have this enabled. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Enabled means it will execute. Hit disable, it won't execute. So if I walk into it, it doesn't execute. But it's enabled. Now it will. Execute on startup. This makes the element execute when the moment you load into the lobby. Now, I thought this for a while. I thought it loaded when you went through the black screen, but no, this is for the lobby. You don't really use this execute on startup a lot, but you use it for this setup, which is on every single map. Have a mission script. A mission script element is just a blank element that does nothing. It's there exclusively to execute other elements. So it's very common to have a mission script element with execute on startup that's connected to a player spawner. So with everything I taught you today, you should be able to determine that this mission script element executes when you load into the lobby, and it will execute the player spawner, which spawns the player. So this episode we learned about how elements can work with each other and trigger each other to do specific things. And everything specific with this menu right here. Next episode we'll be learning about how elements can trigger units and how they can make units do specific things.